Question I'm asking you this morning is about the pensions triple lock after the government minister, Work and Pensions Secretary himself, Mel Stride, said that the triple lock is unsustainable. He said in long term they would have to basically look at the cost of that. But I want to know whether you agree and what you make of it. Well, let's go to some of your messages before we go to our first guest on this. Gary says, of course it's unsustainable, mostly because despite knowing the wave was coming for the last 60 years, they've done absolutely nothing about mitigating it. Stormy asks simply, why does this country treat our pensioners so badly? Anita says, no, the pension paid in this country is one of the lowest across Europe, which is true, it is. Arthur says, that's okay, get rid of the triple lock, but don't tax my pension. Sean points out, no, pensions don't even get a living wage. And Newman says, if this government does anything to interfere with the triple lock, they will be making a big mistake. The UK state pension is the meanest in Europe anyway, and never forget that all pensioners vote. And George says, if we can afford the hotel bills for migrants, we can afford to treat our elderly with dignity. If we can afford foreign aid, we can afford decent pensions. I'm fed up with politicians that waste our taxes. Well, let's talk about all of those comments. Been coming in thick and fast on Twitter at TalkTV or on text 87222. Don't forget you can call as well, 0344 499 1000. But let's talk about all of this with someone who was actually Minister of State for Pensions. That's Baroness Altmann, who joins us now. Good morning to you, Ros.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. Are these people right that they are affordable?
Of course they're affordable. You know, this is a political choice. This isn't, you know, something that is a nice to have. It's an essential to have some kind of basic minimum support for pensioners. What is definitely valid is to say the triple lock needs to be reviewed. The triple lock actually isn't working properly. That's the issue. You know, it's giving a lot more protection to the youngest pensioners who don't need it as much. And it doesn't even apply.
Why does it give more protection to younger pensioners?
Because the triple lock was introduced in 2011, and at that stage, it was just applied to the basic state pension in the old system, which is now about £156 a week. I would challenge most people to try and live on that, by the way. Then in 2016, the government introduced a new state pension. That is worth over £200 a week, but only goes to anyone who's reached pension age since 2016. So you have to be around 70 or younger to be able to get that. And they applied the triple lock to the full new state pension. So the extra bits of the old state pension aren't protected. And they didn't even apply the triple lock to pension credit. Now, obviously, this is a very complicated system and it's a shame, but politicians have hidden behind this word triple lock as if it's some kind of totemic symbol that we're protecting pensioners properly. And actually, it doesn't work so well anymore.
Well, that's very interesting because, again, we all remember, well, those of us old enough remember that, you know, it was a pledge that had to come in about treating pensioners well, you know, David Cameron and others bringing this in because, you know, that horrific backlash when Gordon Brown as Chancellor introduced a 75p a week pension rise, and people were just absolutely horrified. It wasn't going to make a difference to people at all.
And we do have to protect pensioners properly, that's true.
But we're in that difficult situation where pensioners do get, and lots of people pointing out on social media to us, that, you know, our pension, our state pension is one of the lowest, I mean, really, really low compared to most other countries. And yet we've got this unaffordable pension cost. So we're not living a lot longer than other people. We're not retiring a lot earlier. So why are we in a unique mess here? Why is it costing so much when we're not actually spending very much per pensioner on it?
Well, the cost of state pensions here is much lower than other governments are spending. This is a political choice. Most other countries seem to think that they do owe their pensioners a decent amount of income, far higher than we pay. Now, we have a system which I think makes sense, which says the government will pay you a basic minimum amount and will also incentivize you to have extra money on top of that in the form of tax and national insurance relief for pensions, private pensions. The trouble is that over the years, the cost of those incentives has gone up. We now spend more than £70 billion a year, not that far off what we spend on the whole of the state pensions on tax incentives for private pensions.
But
that's half of pensioners get them. So the rest, millions of people, rely only on this very low minimum amount, and mostly they are women. More women than men have just the state pension. How many young people would say they could have a decent lifestyle on a pension of £156 a week, or even £200 a week, to be fair? You know,
although when we talk about those numbers, but look, when you talk about people, you know, people on benefits, I mean, again, are getting a lot less money than that if you're just on unemployment benefit. But you're not taking into account people's rents being paid, the housing benefit as well, and that's going to be an even bigger issue with more and more millions more young people not affording to buy their own home and therefore needing to pay private rents in the future. Well, how do we make this sustainable? We've seen what's happened in other countries. They've been raising the retirement age. Lots of talk that actually this was kicked into the long grass again and again and again by subsequent governments because it's so unpopular. And also there are a lot of people that I might be able to, I mean, God forbid my audience wouldn't want this, to carry on yapping on the radio, sitting on my bottom until I'm 70.
You'd all be happy with that, Julia.
I'm sure my husband, at least I'm out of the house. But if you're working on a building site, you know, you can't be on your, carrying, ladders and things at the age of 70. So what is the solution to this?
Okay, so there are solutions, and politicians have shied away and seem to be frightened of them, and have just hidden behind this word triple lock as if it's some kind of nirvana, which it is not. First of all, drop the 2.5%. If inflation and earnings are going up by 1%, I also don't think pensioners should get 2.5. That doesn't make sense to me. That would cut the costs straight away. Also, you could change the way you calculate earnings and inflation over time. So instead of having it just 1 month or 3 months, you could have an average over the past year, or even a smoothed average of earnings and prices. Again, that would save costs. But the most important thing for me is just pushing up the state pension age is so damaging to those poorest people who are not well, genuinely not well, people who had the kind of careers you were saying, they've had heavy manual labour jobs and their bodies are worn out. Yes, you and I can probably keep doing whatever we're doing into our 70s. And the top 10% of the population stay fit and healthy until their early 70s. For them, keeping jacking up the age isn't a problem. But half of the population are no longer fit and healthy from their early to mid.
Yeah, but isn't that, well, actually, for about the age of 50 for a lot of people, isn't that something we need to tackle? Look, there's the other issue. IPPR report out today saying that there is a serious fiscal risk of the cost of sick leave, 2.6 million people. We have far more people in this country who apparently got long COVID, who've got long-term mental health, stress issues, back issues, people waiting for operations. But again, if you're waiting for an operation to have your knee, a knee replacement or a hip replacement because you've basically sat on a couch and eaten for the last 20 years, and that we know that's a major cause of those operations now. To a certain extent, you've got to take personal responsibility for that. Is there an element where we have to say, as a nation, we have a national conversation that it's not fair for young people who've got cost of childcare, university debt, monumentally high rents to pay and all of that, stagnant pay for a large number of years, that actually they shouldn't be having to pay taxes to fund a load of people who, a lot of people, by the way, still were retired on final salary pension schemes in their 50s, and have had a much better deal than the young people.
Well, they have, but they are the minority. That's the problem. We're forgetting, just because we all know some very well-off pensioners, there are millions who are not.
Yeah.
As a country, are we suddenly saying, well, you had your national insurance payments and you were promised at least a basic minimum, decent, protected state pension. We're going to snatch that away from you. Maybe we'll make you claim it with means testing, and that'll put everybody off saving unless they're pretty well off.
Yeah.
The point here is, for example, if you want to cut costs, let's roll in the tax-free winter fuel payment to the state pension and tax it. Let's say you don't get a full state pension after just 35 years, which is ridiculous. If you started work at 16, you've done 35 by age 51. That's not a full working life.
Yeah.
If you have to have 45 years, either you pay for the extra years or you get less. That also will cut costs. If you didn't live in this country for all your working life and you've only got 30 or so years, why should you get the full state pension?
But do we also need to have a conversation and be honest about, again, look, lots of people do far more useful work than I do. You know, we don't survive without people, you know, doing jobs, you know, emptying bins and a lot of the work that's often very low paid, low reward. Those people are not paying enough tax to cover even their public service use when they're in work. Certainly doesn't cover the cost of their pensions when they retire. But they are, you know, they are working, they're producing. Some people are lucky enough to do jobs where they get well paid, and some people aren't. And, you know, life is unfair like that. But we're in a situation where a lot of people say, I've been working since I was 16, I've paid in, it's my money. Not understanding that actually the vast majority of us never pay enough tax to cover the pensions on the state pension that we will receive.
Well, again, that aspect of it should have been planned for.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't, why are you punishing the very people who might most need that money? You know, we are one of the richest countries in the world. To suggest that we can't afford one of the lowest state pensions in the world.
Yeah, it's quite telling. Yeah, no, it's a very good point. Ros Altmann, we'll have to leave it there. Baroness Ros Altmann, thank you so much.